Eric, Roberts, just stoked that we could take this time to be connected. I've been really looking forward to getting the lowdown on Roamz Life, this amazing development concept that you've developed, and really hearing, some of the technology around that, but really about the concept itself. Because, as you know, I'm all about promoting people and shining the light on legends like you who are on the absolute front line of the radical transformation of society and culture. And your development and your concept, what you're proposing, Roamz Life, is absolutely fulfilling that vision and that dream in a no compromise, hardcore eco way. So just thrilled to be really getting the lowdown on this whole thing, Eric, at this early stage. Thanks so much. Welcome to the call.
Thank you. It's really good to be here, Patrick.
Such a pleasure. And really cool to be connected. I mean, you've got just quite the background and the history in doing this kind of work, in being an earth lover, and, right from early 90s with
Arts Village.
Right from the early 90s with Fern Gully and being the creator and the genius behind that, which, I haven't met anybody who hasn't heard of that. A beautiful, beautiful kids film that really tells the story in a powerful way. And, from there, of course, the world's continued on its path and, things aren't necessarily getting better for the most part, but we're making some really good progress in some areas as well. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on what's happening globally. What are the greatest solutions as you see them, and what we can all do to make a difference now. So once again, thanks for taking the time. And Eric, before we jump into any of that, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about you. Just tell us where you're at, what's going on. You're in India right now, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, I'll start right at the beginning.
That'd be great.
My name is Eric Roberts. I have a long history of working in film, in real estate development, in tourism, and oh my goodness, a bunch of other industries. I set up a company back in the late 80s, I think it was, and we went forward after much deliberation and work with a film production called Fern Gully, which we just spoke about. That was a huge success. It was actually the only film that's ever been screened in the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York. It was really quite an honor. And it had a big impact on an entire generation. And it was all about an environmental mess. And around that time, I was also doing a lot of technology startups in the 80s. I was spending a lot of time in the US. We did a lot of reverse takeovers where we'd buy sort of disused shell companies and vend in a new technology and then float that either on the Toronto market or New York exchange.
Wow.
So I've always kind of been in around environmental issues and doing different things, but, really rather than kind of being an eco warrior and getting out there and kind of, pushing my personal agenda, I just was always just trying to help people achieve their goals in that area. I also did a lot of tourism development. I've done about 200, maybe $300 million worth of real estate development.
Wow.
One of those developments was a resort, what I called an integrated resort in Fiji, where we basically kind of created a shopping center, resort, and a cultural facility, which is world-class cultural facility. We won multiple international awards with that. And what became really interesting, that development for me was a really important one. It was a transitional development for me because I'd been into the environment and I'd made a lot of money out of real estate, but I'd never really kind of tapped into the significance of social responsibility in your business place, for one reason or another. It really wasn't intentional, just somehow just never really happened. It was always about the environment for me. And what we did there, besides kind of creating a resort that was great for the tourists, and it also brought them together with the locals. A lot of these sorts of resorts and places like that are very exclusive, so there's it's a big resort on the beach somewhere with a big fence around it, and the only experience that people have of the local culture is being served pina coladas by the
Sure.
Whereas in our resort, there was a major cultural element, and we set up this extraordinary we had an island in the middle of a lagoon that was like 15 acres. And in that island, we created an entire ancient Fijian village. We actually had the only pre-Christian temple in Fiji on that property. And so not only did we have a lot of tourists coming through there, but we catered for every single school in Fiji every year. And so I had really close ties with the Fiji Tourism Board, and the Prime Minister at the time was a friend of mine, and we did all sorts of stuff that was really cool. But one of the things that we did was we set up like a micro loan structure, and we encouraged local people to set up businesses because we knew we'd have a lot of tourists coming through, and we also had the local community coming through. And I set up a market, which everybody told me I was crazy to do. But our very first market,
that's always a good clue, right?
Yeah. And in our very first market, we had 25,000 people come through that day. And literally, everybody on the island was shocked that we managed to get that many people. So, so we gave out a lot of loans, and we helped a lot of people start businesses. And in fact, we helped 90 different businesses get started there.
Wow.
And we completely revitalized the community. We put in schools, we put in medical facilities where there were none. And, we did a lot of good. And I found that process of doing that resort, a tourism resort, to be completely life-changing for me. And it made me realize that it wasn't just about being in service to community. It was about being in service to humanity and, environment, being in service to environment. It was about being in service to community as well. And so, and then after that, I spent quite a bit of time on a farm that I had in northern New South Wales, and we became completely self-sufficient over about a 10-year period. And I did a bunch of other things as well, but mostly I just hid away from the world. And now Roamz Life has sort of come about as a result of all of those experiences and all of the things that I learned over the last 3 decades. And it's kind of a melding and a meshing of all of those. So we're also, my wife and I are complete nomads. We're total gypsies. We travel around the world all the time. We can't sit still for too long. So, and this more recent phenomenon of digital nomadism, where people finally realized that their work wasn't specific to any one location. And there's now 67 million of those people out there in the world that are wandering around the place doing all sorts of stuff, And with a huge increase in ecotourism, which is now 25% of the global tourism market.
Wow.
We thought, well, there's an opportunity here to actually take the concepts of digital nomadism, where work is not tied to a location, and apply that to your concept of home, right?
Beautiful.
And it's an interesting one because people have this idea about their home, their real estate, as being this kind of, it's a secure investment that's sitting there that they can always count on, that costs them money every month because they've probably got a massive mortgage and they're paying 3 times what they should be for the property, but it gives a sense of security.
Sure.
And we kind of unhinge that sense of security a little bit, because we're not actually going to, in Roamz Life, and not selling real estate. What we're doing is we're providing a right to occupy for life. And the reason that we do that is because Roamz Life is not one community in one location. It's starting as that, and that's what we're doing in Bali. And but it's just the first of what we will turn into a network of communities around the world. And this right to occupy gives you an enormous amount of freedom and additional security in a different way, in that once you own one of those, what we call residencies, that right to occupy, you can use it in any of the locations that we'll have around the world. And we're currently negotiating on another 9 properties, and I've got a list of different things. I've got people all around the world. My team are out there doing all sorts of stuff, like finding amazing properties,
Beautiful.
Some of these will be greenfield properties where we just take land and we turn it into a development. Bali is one of those. It's all bamboo. We've got the best bamboo builders in the world building it. And many others will be properties that we find, like we've identified an amazing castle in Italy that has about 20 farmhouses broken up into, I think it's about 45 apartments.
Wow.
So there's this incredible 15th century castle, like it's fairy tale castle in the middle of a 700 hectare property with farmhouses scattered all over the place. And that will also be a Roamz Life location. We've got others as well. There's some extraordinary properties that we're finding.
So tell me specifically about the experience that someone could have. Say I was a digital nomad, which of course we are, and we're traveling and we're having a great time. So I totally relate. For someone who's involved in that, what kind of an experience, what kind of a lifestyle, what can we expect in a Roamz Life kind of a setup?
What we wanted to do is not just have this right to occupy. We wanted to actually make it a complete holistic package of how do you redefine your life? Because it's my belief that the systems that we're working under right now don't really work. They're not catering to everybody, right?
Sure.
And some people are so deeply entrenched in that system that it's impossible for them to see that there is other possibilities out there. So, and, myself and many of my colleagues, yourself included, we all know that there's something deeply wrong with the system that we're living in. And a lot of people rage against that. They go out and they protest this and they protest that, and they sit around at home and they talk with their friends and they're always complaining about what's here and how it shouldn't be like this, But to me, that's not the solution. To me, all you're doing is you're adding power to that bad system. So what we decided to do, and when I say we, it's sort of myself, my wife, but also there's a kind of a collective of us that are all working together to create environments that are significantly different and that are much more nurturing to us as human beings and to the environment as well. So what we've decided to do is we've decided to say, okay, let's create what we believe is our ideal living environment, and then open the doors up to the right people, who are also feeling the same as we are.
Nice.
And then keep opening it up, and keep expanding it and expanding it and expanding it until eventually, we have millions of people living like this. And I believe that real change comes about by actually making the change in the first place.
Nice.
That's how the change is so simple, but you have to actually get there to do it first.
Yep.
And then when people see, for instance, key components of Roamz are this right to occupy, which allows you to live in any part of the world that we have a community in, and live there as long or as little as you want. So you can spend, a month in Bali and then spend the rest of your time in Vancouver, because we'll have one in Vancouver.
Wow.
Or you switch it around and spend 9 months in Bali and the rest of the year in Vancouver. So that's the first component. The second component is edible gardens and full 100% food security. So all organic food, you don't pay for it in the traditional sense of going to a little marketplace that we'd set up when you buy it, because what we're doing is we're providing a whole bunch of services around each community that everybody contributes to, either in cash or contribution to community. And it's all at cost. It's not a profit center, right? And we're actually kind of trying to do away with the whole idea of profit centers, because it really only benefits the owners. So what we'll have is you'll have a home, a place to live, a place you can lay your head down and do your work and do all that sort of stuff. But you'll also have all the food that you need as part of your home, your right to occupy, right? And then on top of that, we're providing within each community a bunch of facilities like workshop spaces and communal working spaces and that sort of thing, so that you can go out and actually start, making some valid contribution, not just to community, but to your own well-being. Then we're also setting up an incubator where you'll have the opportunity to get funding for any of the ideas that you have. Yep. And then there's so many different things that we're adding to this. But the other thing is that we recognize that it's not just about the community itself. There needs to be a bunch of infrastructure around each of those communities. And so we're actually going out and locating some really significant land holdings. Like one of the farms that we're looking at in New Zealand is 6,000 hectares. So it's 6 kilometers by 18 kilometers in size, this property. And that will be a farm that produces the food and the various other things that we can produce from that property for the community. And the objective is and we're also, looking at our energy companies. We're working with some people doing biomass energy systems. And we're not talking about little kind of, little solar farm on an acre or something like that. the biomass people that we've got 3 different groups that we're talking with. Each of those projects is a $200 to $500 million project.
Whoa.
We're looking at setting up a solar farm in Townsville. These guys are actually almost all funded, and we're coming in with the final funding for them. And that is a $400 million project.
Wow.
So the intention is to actually allocate around about 90% of our funding to infrastructure and food and energy production. And then 10% of it is going to go towards the communities itself.
Wow.
And what we're doing is we're using this really messed up fractional banking system that has been abusing people for the last, ever since banking started, pretty much.
Yep.
It's debt financing, which essentially is like economic slavery.
Yep.
And we're using the systems that those banks have created to make themselves outrageously wealthy. And we're actually adapting it to us so that we can make our community absolutely wealthy.
Wow.
So we have a deal on the table for a series of, it's 9 different banks in Europe at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they have about, it's 400 or 500 branches in various countries. They're spread across it's 9 countries, 9 banks. Yeah, 9 countries. So, and we can utilize the systems that are basically making them rich, but give it all back to the community. So things like interest-free loans, and we can leverage the money the way that the fractional banking system does. We only need to have 10% in reserve, and we can literally create money out of thin air for our community. So, on the cards is also a universal income for everybody, so that when you join the community, as soon as we've got the infrastructure set up to do this, everyone will get a universal income, and that will be not just base income of just enough to scrape by, but actually a comfortable income, 50 grand, maybe something like that each year. That's you get as just being a member of the community.
Wow.
Which then allows you to, instead of working to survive, it allows you to then shift your whole emphasis of work to following your passions. And that's one of the key factors that we will be incorporating into the community, is that we encourage people to follow their passions and do good for themselves, for their community, for the world in general.
Beautiful.
There's a slew of other ancillary services and things like that, housekeeping and all sorts of different things. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that there is another way to live. Yes. And it is economically viable, and it is all encompassing. It helps everybody that's in that community. And the reasoning behind having all this other infrastructure and food production and energy production is that we realize that at some point our communities won't be enough. There won't be enough space for people to join the Roamz Life network, and so at some point we realize that people are going to come along and say, they may be on the property next door and say, look, can I be part of this? And if we have significant enough infrastructure to accommodate 10 times more the people than we have in our community, then we can turn around and say, yeah, sure, why not? Why wouldn't you?
Of course.
Dreaming through here, so I'm
starting.
So that's a general idea of what we're doing, and we're kicking it all off with a very simple little 20-home project in Bali. I've got a lot of other projects lined up, and right now we're just using our knowledge of international financing to secure a substantial amount of money to go out and continue locking up all these other assets.
Wow.
And then basically all that money that we're getting is we're feeding it back into the community. It becomes a community asset, and everybody benefits from it by way of income and food production and all sorts of stuff like that. So,
beautiful. Eric, it's just such an extraordinary vision. I mean, what you've created, who even thinks of that? I mean, we can all see the problems, we can see the challenges, but to come up with such a powerful and an elegant solution, I get goosebumps when you talk about it. I mean, anyone listening, it's just amazing. It's just amazing.
Well, and we have other things going on as well. I'm working with some extraordinary people globally. we've got a collective of over 65 different communities around the world, and there's guys out there that have done extraordinary stuff in terms of, governing systems, for instance. And we all think, when we think of the word govern, we have this mental, it just clicks, and it's like, oh, that means somebody up there, somewhere I've never even met or don't know, is telling me how to live my life. But there are social systems out there that are not, they're not social democracy. They're not any of the current paradigm that we understand, but they are collective ways of self-governing. And they work extremely well. And so we've got guys that have, been focused on this for the last 50 years and have created extraordinary systems. And basically, they're just tapping into all of that knowledge that's there. Wow. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge out there, and there's a tremendous amount of working models that are actually working right now. So there's no point in inventing the wheel when somebody else has already done it.
Done the work.
Sorry. So the idea is that, it's not just a community where we set it up the way that we think it should be. I mean, I'm just seeding this, essentially. I have an idea of how we could start, right? But when it comes down to it, it's actually everybody's responsibility, and everybody's participates and actually has a real say in how we live our lives.
Wow. And that autonomy, that self-directedness, that self-empowerment to say, this is what I want for my life. Something that's massively one of the things out of many that's missing from our current society and culture. A lot of people don't have that sense of self-determination, and it's horrible.
Yeah, people are so disenfranchised and so disempowered that they don't even realize how disempowered they are. And it comes out in places like the road. We went to New Zealand for a few months last year, and I remember, we're just driving around being typical kind of tourists, And I had mothers with kids in the back of their car, like flipping us the bird because we, decided to change lanes or something like that at the last moment. It was so ridiculous. And what it's like living in Bali, where the traffic is just everybody's responsible for themselves. There's virtually no rules at all, and yet it works incredibly well.
Yeah.
You go to a typical Western country, and the control that's placed on everybody on the road is outrageous. You're always looking over your shoulder, checking your speedo, and terrified of what's going to happen next. And you have so little tolerance for anybody else doing anything else on the road. Yeah. And Bali kind of taught me that it doesn't have to be like that. You can actually have a really great time riding around or driving around and really enjoy yourself and do and behave how you want, and still it all works.
Yeah. Yeah, massive. It was one of the biggest challenges, but one of the most wonderful things about coming here was the level of personal freedom is amazing. And of course, what comes with that is personal responsibility. Exactly, and you're right, it's amazing how it works.
So many people are terrified of that personal responsibility part, but once you get used to being back in that situation again, where you actually are responsible for yourself, and you're responsible, actually that responsibility extends out to all the people around you, but not from a duty of care, but from a be considerate sort of perspective.
Yeah, from love. Yeah. From compassion. So tell me, with that in mind, I think that's a really cool point. What do you see as some of the, probably some of the greatest challenges that humanity is facing, some of the things that we're absolutely dealing with now and going to have to deal with? And specifically, how does Roamz Life and this kind of lifestyle answer those challenges?
Well, we've kind of touched on it all already.
We have covered a fair bit. Yeah. With really, the banking system, with society.
Yeah, and I mean, we all know what's wrong with society. It's just not working. It's designed right now to feed the rich and make them richer, and to disempower everybody else, and just force them in a direction that they don't necessarily want to go. But half the time, disguising it mostly through fear, so that people just do it. Even though they don't really want to. So, most people in the world are not living the life that they'd really like to live.
I think that's a pretty fair statement.
They're accepting it because they're scared of what the consequences might be. And they've been taught to be scared because the officials are telling us there's so much out there that is scary, The greatest challenge, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I'm not meeting with a lot of challenges in terms of setting this up, because what I find is that everybody who comes across what we're doing is just the most common response is, "Oh my God, I thought of this years ago, and I've been hoping that something like this would happen."
Yeah.
And it's just time and time and time and time again. I guess one of the hardest parts is, trying to create a new system from the bones of an old system, essentially.
Yeah, sure.
So we still have to work within the old system. Our legal corporate structures still need to be part of the current system. But the way that we then implement, the community is different. So it's kind of, I probably guess the most significant challenge is trying to meld those two worlds until hopefully we don't need the initial structure, the current structure anymore. I believe that inherently people are good, and the ones that aren't good are just people that have a lack of love in their heart, essentially. I don't think there's anything such as good and evil. It's just love or the absence of love. And that's really what it boils down to. And so when you create a nurturing environment that actually really does care about its participants and involves them in everything that's going on, I believe that the whole thing shifts. Everybody's mindset shifts and everybody becomes much more community-based,
Eric, this is such a fabulous concept. I think you've done a beautiful job in just wrapping it up so concisely. I don't really have a lot more to ask about. I mean, it's fabulous. It's such a cool concept. But what I would say in before we wrap up, what's the opportunity for someone to get involved with this? It sounds like you're okay for money, so you're not looking for investors at this stage. That's kind of closed for that? Or
we're looking for people to jump on board, make a small financial commitment, and it's really just really for them to lock in the opportunity to be amongst the first to join the communities.
All right,
so
cool.
As I mentioned, we're doing the one in Bali. We've bought land in New Zealand. We've got 7 hectares down right in the heart of Queenstown. It's such a cool location. It's on top of a hill that's in the middle of town. And looking out over the lakes, and it's just stunning, right? And another property nearby that's 6,000 hectares, as I mentioned. So what we're doing is we're opening up the doors. This has kind of come about a little bit because of yours and my conversation. We weren't really. I'd had a few people just jump in. Like I had a major Hollywood actor jump in and say, "I want those. I want a 3-bedroom house in this community." And the right to occupy other ones. And so I'm on board, and it's done deal.
Beautiful.
And we've had a few other people reserve them because they just don't want to wait, and they don't want to wait until we generally release to the public, and they want to make sure that they secure their position. So we thought about it, and after my conversation with you, I thought, okay, what we'll do is we'll take some holding deposits.
Okay.
And I think we'll set it probably around €500 or something like that. And that gives you that first right.
It's nominal.
At the cherry. And then I thought, well, I got to give people like a reward for jumping in at this stage, And so we thought, well, we'll give everybody a 10% discount if they jump in. And they throw down a holding deposit and they get first bite at the cherry when we release.
Yep.
They'll have the first chance to get it. And what's happened is we've only promoted it a little bit, and it really was just to see, okay, what's going to be the reaction. So we did a bit of test marketing, and it would. And now we have people signed up. I think it's about 50% of the occupancy capacity that's available. We have that number of people already signed up.
Wow.
So we haven't even started construction yet. We're just still talking with the architects about design, and and yet it's already kind of like that.
Right.
So
it's not hard to see why it's creating such incredible attraction. It's such an amazing project.
Yeah. And we haven't even begun to start marketing. I mean, I've got some amazing marketing team, these extraordinary growth hackers. It's sort of a distributed team around the world. And, we've looked after vice presidents and different people, some major companies and all sorts of people. Once I get them onto it, and they're itching to get started, and I'm like, no, not yet. But once they get going, I know it's going to go crazy. And that's one of the reasons why we're buying existing properties and refurbishing them to suit, because I know that we're going to need as many properties on in the network as quickly as we can, because the demand is definitely there.
Well, man,
So
I really appreciate you sharing this. Yeah, sharing this with our audience. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no worries. Well, so for your guys, that opportunity is there. You can throw down a holding deposit, and then you're first in line. We've had people push really hard, and we've actually taken some full deposits and signed people up for, I think it's about 4 or 6 residencies. I'm not sure. And those people basically put down a full deposit. That opportunity's there. We're not kind of pushing that because, but there's a few people that just absolutely were determined that they were not going to, miss out at all. Like they just, they believe that we'll have way many more people than there will be residencies, and they wanted to be certain. So, so
when
yeah, yeah, that's the opportunity at the moment. And we're going to start. Well, we had actually, I think I mentioned to you in a text earlier today, we had a major breakthrough with our major funding push. Yesterday. And so I'm very excited about that, because we're basically kind of like, we're the Robin Hood of the modern day, in that, we're using the systems that the large institutions and banks and governments are using to basically kind of manipulate people into this economic slavery. And we're taking that system and we're using it to our benefit.
Wow.
And so it's a really exciting time, because once we get that, we've got it nailed down now, and we're just waiting for the proceeds to roll through now.
Wow.
And then we can replicate it and replicate it and replicate it. And once we've got that system rolling, we're going to be completely unstoppable. It's the one thing that stops most of these types of communities is lack of funding or undercapitalization.
Yeah, sure.
And so I kind of made it my mission to go out and find a way to fund a really significant network of developments without having to compromise by bringing on investors that would then force us to do stuff that wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the community, but instead in the best interest of the investor.
Yeah, sure.
And that was something that was really kind of dear to me. I didn't want us to be in any way compromised in how we created this community. It has to be for the community.
Beautiful.
And the only way to do that is to make the money super clean.
Yeah, nice. So tell me, have we got some timelines on this, on what people can expect, where we're kind of up to in the whole process? And
as soon as I get back to Bali, we're going to kick off the actual planning and development.
Yes.
So that's about a 4 to 5 month process, and then we're looking at another 3 months to get the first of the homes built and a chunk of the community space. In the next 12 months, I expect the Bali to be up and running, but I'm hoping that it should only take us around 3 to 6 months with each of the other properties as well. And we've got them pretty close now. So I'm hoping in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll acquire at least the first half a dozen properties over and above the Bali property.
Wow.
And by, say end of the first quarter of 2018, we should have at least a half a dozen, or maybe 7 or 8 up and running and functional. So that's
fantastic.
That's what we're aiming at. You never know what, as in everything in life, everything takes longer than you thought it was going. And you put down your plans and you map it all out and you create your timelines and your Gantt charts and all this stuff. And then, 3 months later, you're there scratching your head going, oh, Jesus, that's so much longer than I thought it would take,
Yeah.
But that's the intention.
Gotcha.
So
beautiful.
Not tomorrow, but it's not, it's not 5 years in the future either.
Perfect.
I'm used to projects like Fern Gully took us 10 years to raise the funding for it.
Whoa.
That was really tricky. And, but at the time it was the largest, it was the highest budget for a non-Disney animated feature film, essentially the highest animated feature film budget in history at that time. And we were the only people by a country mile to come, to surpass Disney and the majors.
Yep.
So, it was tricky, we were making a movie about, you know, some kid who gets shrunk down to the size of a wood fairy and runs around, you know, trying to fight off the evil oil companies. So it was, yeah, it was not an easy one to fund.
Yeah.
You know? Funding films is never, but a cartoon about fairies is actually even trickier.
Eric, so anybody who, I mean, that's
so,
kind of the timelines. We've got that all coming up. That's fantastic. Anybody who, you know, gets this, who feels this in their heart, that this is something, there's opportunity to jump on board now to secure your place so that you're first in line, first in time when the time comes. And, you know, happy to have a chat with anybody who's interested in that situation, who thinks this might be something for them and wants to get some more details. Then let's get in touch. Let's have a chat and we can put you in touch with people. But what a fabulous vision, a fabulous concept. Any final thoughts, last words to add before we wrap up?
Oh God, you know, at the end of the day, everyone needs to do everything that they can to make the change, because we can't keep abusing this planet the way that we have. We can't let these people in power continue to abuse us and abuse the planet the way that they are. And you know what? At the end of the day, they're not evil people. They're just terribly misguided, you know, and they're so caught up in their own little worlds that they've lost sight of what's really most important. And the most important thing is, you know, it's not about power and acquisition of wealth and all this sort of stuff. It's actually about looking after each other. That's really what it comes down to. And I don't know, I'm a bit different to most people. I don't see any difference in the value of the you know, the life that's in these trees behind me, as compared to the life of a cow, as compared to my own life. I think each one of us is as valid as the next. And you know, it's been shown without a shadow of a doubt that these plants actually have behavior patterns, and they have a fundamental intelligence. There's a plant in the desert in New Mexico that is pollinated by a moth, right? Okay. The same moth lays eggs while it's pollinating the plant, lays eggs on the plant, and that the caterpillar eats the plant. Now, when there's too many of those caterpillars on the plant, and the plant sends out distress signals when it starts being eaten, which attract the predators of that caterpillar, right? What? Extraordinary. Yeah, it attracts it. That's what it's designed to do. So it pulls in predators that will eat those grubs. If there's an overload, what it does is it turns around and it changes the shape of its flower. It changes the time when it actually has a scent, from nighttime to daytime. And the pollinator then for this particular plant becomes the hummingbird. And it takes 8 days, eight days for it to make that transition, right? Now, that, in my mind, is just as much of like a survival behavior as anything that any animal or any human being does. And so we look at these things and we think, oh, you know, they're just plants. They're not as important. You know, we can do whatever we like to them.
Yep.
But the reality is that every single living creature on this planet has just as much right to be here as you and I do, you know? And so it's our responsibility to actually come back to a place where we become, you know, helpers and custodians of that. And we start to respect this planet, you know, because it's extraordinary. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, it blows my mind. Yeah. You know, it really does. So that's about all I have to say.
I'm with you there, brother. I feel it. And it's a beautiful message. And interesting that, I mean, not a common message, but a lot of the people I'm talking to are echoing a very similar sentiment right now, and really talking about the, you know, for sure the challenges that we're facing, but the solutions aren't going to come through. You know, technology is wonderful, and, you know, there's a whole bunch of really cool things that are happening, but they're saying that it's down to each one of us to start to consider our role in all of this, and how we show up, and how loving we can be, and how grateful we can be, and how we can support all life and become stewards. It's a really, really common theme, and it's beautiful to hear you sharing that same sentiment as well, because that's the message, right? That's exactly what needs to happen. And what's super awesome about that is to see you playing your part in a spectacular way and creating, you know, this amazing vision, having the, you know, the vision, the foresight to even imagine that, but then the initiative to actually bring it into the world for all of us to benefit from. And so on behalf of myself, my family, but also the whole audience, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Eric. It's just extraordinary.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm doing it for my family too.
Of course, of course. All right, Eric, all the best. Appreciate your time. It's been great to be connected, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks, man.
Okay,
Bye for now.
mate. Lovely to see you again, Patrick.
Yeah,
Thank
likewise.
you so much. I feel very honoured to be part of your summit, and yeah, I'm excited about the future.